today. I wanted to ask you about the boundary blueprint. So what is the boundary blueprint? Yeah, that's a pretty cool tool.
Okay, so this is in all of us have a unique, what I call downloaded boundary blueprint. So this is in your unconscious mind, and it's basically a paradigm, right? It's something that's already there, and it dictates the way that we relate and express our boundaries. So you can visualize it like an architectural blueprint for a house that someone else designed, like maybe a century ago or decades ago. And it just keeps getting handed down from generation to generation because people don't know to look for it. So as a psychotherapist, I always say that, I'm going to help you go into the basement of your mind, which is your unconscious mind. And we're going to get some stuff. There's material that needs your attention in some boxes. And this is how we reveal your particular blueprint. It has to do with what you saw growing up, the culture, the family, the country you grew up in, the gender, the roles, the family roles, all of those things come together. And that is what is informing right now, whether you say yes when you want to say no, if you are overgiving or undergiving, if you do, are you expressing yourself in a passive aggressive way because being direct is too threatening, or you learned that being direct is rude, right? All of those things impact. So really it's about discovering why you relate to boundaries the way that you do, because that's the beginning of us basically changing the blueprint if it isn't getting you what you want.
So it causes an awareness that we can then work from instead of just kind of blindly going, okay, let me try this and that. And we're like, oh, this is kind of my place where I start allowing people to transgress me. So look at that when it comes up. Yeah.
Yeah. And you said overgiving or undergiving. And I never thought of undergiving as a boundary issue. So that's an interesting thing to hear as well.
Think about overgiving though for one sec. Like this is also the dynamic in codependent relationships where you have one person who's doing the bulk of the giving and the acquiescing and the, like I'm going to maneuver myself to fit around your schedule because I want you to be happy. And there is a tendency, if you are a codependent, even if you get into like if you have that tendency to overgive, want to, codependency is really overt and covert bids for control. I mean, fact that's what that is. So we don't want people to make mistakes. We don't want them to be hurt. We don't want them to be in pain. So we want to tell them what to do, and we want to make connections for them, and we want to make suggestions, and we want to auto fix and do all the things. That really is a form of codependency. So you can actually get into a relationship with someone who's pretty normally functioning. And if you are big time over functioner, you'll notice that person starts functioning less, doing less, because you're like, I got it. And in the beginning, they might be like, no, I got it. But if you insist, I promise you, you can turn a regular functioner into an underfunctioner. Just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm deeply an overfunctioner, and that has been a big struggle for me. And I think it does have to do, when you're speaking to codependency, does have to do with that worry of things are out of control in my young household, growing up, and then that translating into my later life of if I can make sure these things are all set into place, which means I have to do them because no one else is going to do it as well as perfect as I do it, then I can keep it in control, aka I can keep it safe. That causes this whole storm of basically a burden that I've carried with me my whole life.
That's so insightful. Can I just say
Yeah.
that what you just said was so precise and so accurate. And this is what is happening in so many lives. And we don't understand that it is those childhood injuries that are driving our adult behavior. Now, there are things to do though. And part of becoming a boundary boss, which means masterful. Keep in mind, it's not called boundary bully for a reason, right? Because that would be still having disordered boundaries. But the more you understand and sort of take care of and soothe that inner child, the more evidence you have that you are safe now and that you don't need to do that. And when you really get that it blocks intimacy in your relationships, because when I met my husband, I was such like what you're describing, very similar, and nothing made sense where he would want to go out of his way to come pick me up in New York City, even though he lived in Jersey. And I'm like in 20 minutes, I could just take the train. Like that's not efficient. Why would you drive all the way here just to drive me back, And my mother was like, Tara, because there was a lot of things where he just wanted to do things for me because he just wanted to add value to my life.
Yeah.
My mother was like, I have a question, like, why aren't you letting this guy who wants to do those things? But do you see that you're really denying him the pleasure and the connection that doing those things for you would provide. And she's like, Tara, if you continue to reject those offers, you will end up like me, alone, doing everything for yourself and by yourself. Like the offers, even if you end up in a relationship, the offers stop coming
Yeah.
if you keep rejecting. She was like, think about that as a gift. If he handed you a Tiffany's box, you would never throw it on the floor and be like, I don't need this. I was like, you are correct. I would not.
Yeah, that is both frightening and fascinating at the same time, because I can see so much of that tendency in my life where I have been like, no, I got this. I'm the independent woman. I can figure it all out.
Yeah, me too.
Even though I've been in a relationship, in these devoted relationships, but it's largely where I'm much more devoted to the other person, or at least that's how it usually ends up. And that's been a big struggle for me. I totally see that. And the fascinating part to it as well for me is, or layer, I should say, to it as well is, on the show, we talk a lot about the masculine, feminine energy influence. And I identify as that masculine because I'm trying to be the structure and trying to push the things to happen, and taking too much of the burden is what it is. So that's really beautiful to hear it from this way, from someone who is the boundary boss, and that I can quote unquote, I guess maybe this is a very masculine word too, but I can attack this from that angle, setting boundaries instead of being like, how do I get, so ultra feminine that I out feminine him,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know my situation is the same, where that was really necessary for me to heal here, because I constantly turn down help, even from a partner. But I know for me, it comes from a worthiness wound of feeling like I don't deserve the help, or I need to do it myself to prove my worth, maybe. And I love that example that your mom told you, how powerful. Yeah. And I know that you also talk about how most of us, though, were never taught how to effectively express our preferences or desires. So can you maybe give some examples on the opposite end on how that may come about?
Meaning what? How to do it, you mean? Or...
Yeah. Well, more just about how most people were never taught, like you were given that example by your mother, but most people weren't. So can you talk about how that happens in childhood usually? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can tell you from being in the trenches for 25 years with women like you, women like me, high functioning, ambitious, like want to be good friends, good partners, good kids, good, all the things. We just want to do all the right things, and we just want to be loving, right? That we were raised and praised, honestly, to be self-abandoning codependents, like straight up, we were. Be a good girl, turn that frown around. Where's my happy girl? You're like, why am I turning it around if I'm sad? So we learn to deny our feelings if other people will be uncomfortable or if they don't like it. We learn that our value is in prioritizing the feeling states of other people above our own. And then if you grew up in a chaotic system, authoritarian system, a system with a lot of addiction in it, you learn this shit is not about you. Like you learn that so early, because kids are so adaptive. No, we don't need an inner office memo to tell us how to adaptively survive in childhood. We want to get love from a parent who is unwell. If that means we are cooking dinner for all the other kids from 6 years old on, then we are. Like, we're just doing it. We're not disagreeing. We know not to provoke them. We're not complaining. We're not saying what we're not happy about, because that might either result in being physically abused or just being rejected. Like, kids don't want that. So everyone has their own sort of particular story about why their downloaded blueprint is the way it is, because it's not just what we viewed, of course. We unpack it because it's also what we experienced. You could have the role in your family system. There was a lot of alcoholism in my family, and I was the hero child. People are like, well, that's good, right? You're like, no role that is like thrust upon you in childhood is good. You're like, that isn't free. It means you're working as fast as you can to make sure everything is okay. You would talk about being raised and praised for being a codependent, like be the fixer. That's literally your job.
Yeah.
So that created disordered boundaries as well, but very similar to sort of what you're both saying, which is the overgiving and the not allowing others to add value. And I think I didn't want to be a burden. I also, like you were saying, I think I just really felt like nobody's actually going to do it if I don't. So
I can't trust it. Yeah.
Right. Or the perfectionist, like you said, or they won't do it the right way.
Good. Yeah.
Right. It's very much
turns into a
woman's role right now.
Big old dragon on my shoulder for sure. And and also I just add the Jade was talking about, well, what I see it as is that where we feel we're not worthy to ask for what we need, because then we become a burden and we end up apologizing before we even ask, like, so sorry, but can you do this thing? Even though it's like a fair question to ask or need to ask for.
Yeah. I'm definitely not into the over apologizing, as like social KY. Do you know what I mean? Like literally, it's like this social lubricant to like get around any uncomfortable thing. And I think that what we have to really look at with boundaries is that if you say yes when you want to say no, then your yes can't be trusted.
Yep.
And your no can't be trusted. And don't think people in your life don't friggin' know that, because they do. Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, but she's so sweet. She said yes, but it's like 50% chance that she's going to show up. They know.
Yeah.
Or because then we'll either go and be bitter.
Totally. Right? That's me. That's me.
Yep. Where I won't act it in the moment, but like inside, I'm like, I don't need this shit on a Sunday. Yeah. Like, right? Like I didn't want it to rest today. And then what I want to say to myself, if I ever do that, is who's making you do it? Yeah. Like we're doing it. And then blaming other people, right? Feeling like I was talking to one of my girlfriends. I don't know if you know Kate Northrup. Anyway, she's like in the self-help business. And she was like 15 years ago, we were in the West Village, and she was complaining about this person who was asking her to do this thing. And she just was going off like, I cannot believe how entitled Betty is. And I've done so much for her. How could she ask? Like going, and I'm not saying one thing, we're just walking. And then finally we get to where we're going. And I said, yeah, she's got some nerve putting you in the position to have to say no. And she was like, oh my God, why don't I just friggin' say no? I was like, right. We don't need to like character assassin Betty for friggin' asking. Because here's the thing with people asking you to do things that are like ridiculous.
Yeah.
They can and they will. And so instead of focusing on like the nerve of Betty, when you feel solid in your ability to say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't. Or actually, that's not my thing. But I appreciate you thinking of me, but I don't like outdoor concerts. It's not my thing. Like just getting that we're allowed. How about just saying no? Because I don't effing feel like it.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. It's revolutionary. It's literally, one of our questions for you was exactly that, like how having a choice to say yes or no, like having a choice is sometimes just a complete revelation. I know to myself too, I'm like you're saying, Terri, yeah, I could say no here. And that's the thing is, why am I so afraid to say no here? Why am I wearing this mask of saying yes when I should say no all the time? And yeah, it does dig back down to my childhood for sure. It does dig back down to those places that I felt unsafe to say no, essentially, for showing up.
Yes. And the child within, here's the thing about child within work. I can tell you, before I became a psychotherapist, I was a talent agent for years, negotiating contracts for whoever. I was like, the first time I heard the child within, I was like, okay, like I thought it was so like precious and weird and not real. Nice way to be judgmental. But then I became a therapist, and I could not believe, because in my own therapy, my therapist, we didn't talk about it that way, even though we were healing childhood injuries. Yeah. When I became a therapist, I could not believe how powerful doing that work with like it was undeniable. It came up with every single person that, oh, there's a phase, there's an injury, there's something that happened at this age that is keeping you stuck. And that is what also happens. So let's get into what you were just saying about like, it's the childhood injuries that kind of make it so hard or almost seem impossible, right? It's like in your mind, you're like, literally, I cannot do it, right?
Feels like I'm going to, it's like close to death. Yeah. Like
yes. But that's how you know that it is a childhood reaction. So I'm going to give you some tools right now so that we can figure out when you're in a situation and it could be a repeated situation, or it can be a situation that is very, I had a situation where I was in grad school where I was at an internship, and I had this boss who like I friggin' hated in a way that was not normal for how much I did or didn't know him. So I was going into therapy one week and being like, I don't like that guy who runs a place. Like he's written some books, but he's a friggin' jerk, and he's cold and he's mean and he's judgmental and he's unavailable and all of these things, as if I had interacted with him a lot.
We do this all the time.
We do. This is us.
So by the second or third time I bring him up in therapy, my therapist was like, okay, I want to ask you something. Can you describe him? I was like, oh, you know the type. He's tall, good looking, he has dimples. He's like he's a Brooks Brothers suit wearing, Wall Street Journal reading, probably martini drinking. I bet he golfs. He's like that guy. He's just like a jerk. She's like, hello. Tara, who does that sound like? And then, of course, I was literally verbatim describing my father,
Wow.
who I was afraid of growing up, who was unavailable emotionally, who was not a jerk, but I was, projecting. He just was emotionally not there, right? But he was someone that my sisters and my mother and we all feared him. So I had this guy, when I had this boss, he would walk down the hallway, and if I saw him, I would literally dive into the ladies' room to avoid passing him in the hallway. Well, that's a bit of an extreme response, no? For a guy who's just my boss. So anyways, she's like, do you know what's happening? And I was like, clue me in, because clearly I don't, because now that you say it, obviously, how did I not see how obvious it was that I was having an amplified reaction to my boss? It wasn't a normal reaction to the situation, right? Doesn't mean I couldn't have acted that way if he was like an abusive, terrible thing, but he wasn't.
Right.
So she's like, okay, so now we know you're having a transference, it's called, right?
Yeah.
To your father. So imagine this, in that moment, I became my 10-year-old self. That guy turned into my unavailable and punitive father in my mind. And so my behavior at that job was now being dictated by my injured 10-year-old. Make sense?
Wow. Yeah. And how do we get there? Like, how do we figure that out?
So you're going to use these, it's called the 3 cues for clarity. So 3 questions. And this is a tool that I share in the book. And I've been using it with my clients for decades, because having a transference, that's what's called psychologically, is really common, which means, I'll just break it down quickly, having a reaction in the present moment fueled by an unresolved injury from the past, meaning something seems similar. The person seems similar. We feel similarly threatened because something triggered like a memory, sort of. So anyway, how we know that is when we have an amplified response, or if we get hot really fast, like something happens and we're super mad, super fast, that can indicate that you're having a transference. If anything that seems out of proportion, when you step back from it, we're like, okay, like I was like losing my shit over this thing that, I don't know, when I look at it objectively, I don't think I should have been. So you're going to ask yourself these questions, because if I had asked myself these questions, I would have figured that out long before I complained to my therapist about it. Right now, who does this person remind me of? Doesn't have to be physical. In my case, it was, but it doesn't have to be. Personality, energy, could be the timbre of someone's voice, the way they walk. Like, so who do they remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? Which is so powerful.
Yeah.
And then the third one is, how is this interactive? Like the behavioral dynamic, the way that I was, like in that case, I was avoiding this person that I feared. So that behavioral dynamic of him basically just walking around doing nothing and me running away to avoid him, that was familiar because I was afraid. So those 3 usually will have you bring to mind something where you're like, oh my God, that feeling is familiar. You can also say, the last thing you can ask is, metaphorically, who do I become? And who does this other person become when we're interacting in this way?
Yeah, that takes some digging. I feel like when I ask myself those questions with someone I have in mind right now, it's like, I can kind of get a feel of it. I can kind of get a feel of what I'm turning into in those situations, but grasping and getting articulate with what that actually is, well, probably would take the help of someone like you or your book, or, like sitting with someone. That'd be a surefire way.
Well, I think that really, though, it's the most important part of this is understanding that there is a parallel process going on. When you are in a situation that's painful, when you are in a repeated something that you wish you weren't, when you're repeatedly doing something yourself, like falling down on yourself, saying, I'm going to stop drinking tomorrow, I'm going to stop hooking, whatever the thing is you want to stop doing, but then you don't stop doing it. These are all indications that something needs your attention, and they are an indication of disordered boundaries, right? You can see that the way that I was interacting with that boss was disordered.
Yeah.
And what my therapist said is, she was like, Tara, the reason it matters is because you're grown up, and if you run away from this person who's your boss, he's never going to see how smart you are, how capable you are. Don't you want to get a job here when you graduate? And I did. And I did after I stopped having this transference to him, because the moment I realized it, honestly, for me, the fear disappeared. And I find about half the time, my clients would go, holy crap, that was so obvious. I'm so not doing that. Like you can just take something from the basement, right? That's your unconscious, and bring it to the main part of the house. And transformation can happen like that. And then there's transformation that takes decades, right? Sometimes it's just this power pivot where you go, oh my God, I have this relationship to authority figures because of my relationship with my father, right?
Yeah. It's like a remembering, like you're just calling that online that you knew it in the subconscious. My dreams do that for me a lot. I dream journal every morning. And then, they show me like, hey, you're not looking at this thing. And I'm like, why are you hitting me over the head with this until I finally get it? But and wow, fascinating stuff.
You ended that with who do I become? And that one is such a big question because I noticed just a couple of weeks ago, I realized when I was really digging into my abandonment wound or my fear of abandonment in meditation, and this memory came back to me. I hadn't forgotten it. I just hadn't thought about it in a long time, of a time when I was like 3 or 4 years old in a car. And, I was having a tantrum. I was 3 or 4, so I was having a typical tantrum. But the person driving the car said, if you don't stop crying, I'm going to throw you out of the car. And I didn't stop crying. And sure enough, they pulled over, threw me out of the car, left me in this field. And it was in the middle of the night in a very empty field. And I was there crying I honestly think I may have cried till I passed out because I don't remember anything after that. But when I went there in meditation with someone we've had on the show, Tina Rodriguez, we did an inner child healing where, we went back and we cradled that little girl and brought life back to her. But I realized that same feeling that came up in me when that memory resurface was how I feel when I think that I'm getting broken up with, or when I think that he's not answering the phone because he's mad at me or whatever it is. So if we can really ask, who do I become in that? It's especially when it comes to breakups, it's usually that little girl or little boy that feels abandoned by whoever the caretaker was.
Wow, that so much, like witnessing you right now with so much compassion, but the insight that you just shared is so powerful. And in the moment when you're in a relationship and you feel like that person might be stepping away or not doing something, and that panic, that constriction and the panic comes up like the dread, it's in that moment that we tend to the inner child. It's at that moment saying, hey, you know what? Nothing has changed. I just had this thought. Everything is okay right now. And no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. So what would feel good? What would be soothing? Is there someone that you can talk to? Like actually tending to the feeling so that you don't act out the behavior in the relationship. Now, you may be, we don't know that you're, because I don't know your history, but whether you're continually sort of having this repeating boundary reality or repeating relationship reality, as I call it, but understanding that can literally be the difference between staying stuck and pivoting away, where you go, oh, it's about self-care, self-love. It's also about, instead of interpreting someone's behavior, when you learn to talk true, you're able to say, you said you were going to get in touch last night when you got home. And when you didn't, I have to say, it really bummed me out. So I'm going to make a simple request that you just do what you say you're going to do, whatever it is. It kicks up childhood shit for me. Like, I just don't love it at all. So it's not that it's a crime. I'm not making you wrong. I'm not super pissed off. I'm making a simple request that you do what you say you're going to do. Now that I've told you that it causes pain for me when you don't. We're teaching people how to love us.
Yeah.
Right? By not letting those things slide.
I really am curious on the other side of that story. If you're a parent who wants to also be able to hold boundaries with their children, and you have a children, Jade's situation obviously is not okay, but But, you get in a situation where you want to discipline your child or tell them, hey, if you do this thing, then this is going to be the consequence. Of course, be very careful, right, of what you promise is going to be the consequence, that it's you want to actually show up for there, or not want to, but will show up for, and it's not dangerous to the child. So how do parents in a situation like that, where they're being tested, they're triggered, they've got all their stuff, is it again about almost like parenting themselves in that moment, or being aware in that moment? So it's kind of just the same, whether you're the parent or the child in the situation. Don't re-traumatize yourself if you're the parent. Don't cause the trauma on the child if you're the parent.
Yeah, you can take a timeout though. Like in Jade's, situation, that if that person clearly didn't have the skills to, but in the moment, if you feel like you're going to lose it, as a responsible parent who has the emotional and mental faculties, you remove yourself. You pull over, and maybe the parent, the person, whoever that was, they get out. They don't, of course, do what they did, because that's obviously abusive and terrible, but they make sure the kid stays safe and safe from them. And there, if they feel like they might be verbally or they might whatever, you remove yourself. But that's why self-care itself is so incredibly important. What were you going to say, Jane?
Oh, that just is so good to hear, because I remove myself all the time. I'll go hide in the pantry for 2 minutes eating chocolate so that I'm not, being any sort of abuse or traumatizing. I just give myself a breath. But my kids freak out at the point, just at the fact that I remove myself. So I'm just glad to hear that permission slip you just gave me.
Without it, trust me, you're like, kids, trust me. The other side of this is not what you want. It's not you eating chocolate. Trust me.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, man. All right. Well, so I did want to ask about something in the book. You talk about high functioning codependency and the boundary challenges it creates. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and how someone knows if they are a high functioning codependent.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I have a feeling my hands going.
Just both of you should just put your hands up right now. All of us. The reason I actually came up with this new name for codependency was because the women in my practice were these very high functioning women, high achieving women, getting it, doing all the things that you're doing, basically running the world and the family and the thing and the PTO and the whatever, doing it, going to SoulCycle, like doing all the things. And so when I would point out that this was some of their behavior was codependent, I would inevitably have them go, wait, you're nuts. Like, hi, I'm the one everyone's dependent on. I'm the rock. I'm the one that does everything, that gives everything, And I was like, hello, that's called being codependent. So I was able to have them see, and this really is a particular flavor, because back in the day, when you think about, Melody Beattie's seminal text, Codependent No More.
Life-changing.
Oh, amazing. And it's been updated and it's amazing. But then it seemed to always be like, you have to be involved with an addict. You're an enabler. That's codependency. And I was like, no, because that isn't. And I knew in my own life that my own behavior that I had healed from was without a doubt codependency, but I never would have identified it as that. So here's my definition, is that if you are overly invested in the feeling states, the decisions, the outcomes, right, the circumstances of the people in your life to the detriment of your internal peace, that is codependency. And you're high functioning, right? Meaning you're doing all these things. I always say, like, they say about Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, right?
Yeah.
But they say Ginger Rogers was doing everything Fred Astaire was doing, except she was doing it backwards and in heels.
Yeah.
So it's like these women, we are doing all the hard things, all the emotional labor, but eventually, and we want to fix all the things. We don't want anyone to be in pain. We're giving auto advice. We're auto accommodating other situations so that there's no conflict. We're eyes always open for like, wow, could there be a problem? Let me see how I can help make sure there's not a problem. And listen, you don't have to have all of those symptoms be.
Yeah, I know. My hand is fully raised. I am dancing in heels backwards for sure.
While you're doing the podcast.
Yeah.
But that's really what it is. And so if you identify with that, folks listening, if you go, holy crap, that's me. I'm doing all the things. I'm trying to fix. I don't want people to be in pain. I feel like when something bad is happening to someone else, the urgency I feels like it's happening to me.
Yes.
So those are all indications of codependency. And then you have the over and under functioning, which we had already talked about a little bit.
Is part of codependency also when those things are happening to another person, you feel it's your fault and that's why you're trying to fix it? Is that part of it? Like you often feel like
guilt,
you're the cause for you take responsibility for people's moods, whether they're good or bad. Is that a bit of it too?
Yes, that itself is codependency, right? If someone comes home, if your person comes home and you're in a fine mood and they're in a terrible mood, if suddenly your fine mood is evaporated and you're like, oh, can I make you a drink? Do you want a cup of tea? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to have sex? Whatever it is that you're trying to do because you're uncomfortable and you do feel responsible. Now, your own flavor of, if you feel the cause of it, that can be an indication of other things. Sometimes that's a yes, but I find that with most people who don't also have like worthiness and shame stuff, even though that's in there, it's this overdeveloped sense of responsibility
to fix it,
to make the pain stop, but when you really think about it, really, what are we doing?
We're enabling them to not ever hit their edges. Yeah.
And we're also, it's worse than enabling, because we're taking away their opportunity for growth. Totally. You know, I had a therapist once say to me, I was codependently connected to one of my sisters who was in a bad situation and living with someone who was abusive and had no running water in the woods and was on crack, like not kidding, like no embellishing. That was the actual situation. And I was crying to my therapist being like, I don't know what to do. I want to give her money. I want to, whatever. Like how is she doing this? And why doesn't she know how wrong it is? Like all the things. Yeah. And then we got to a point where she was like, Terri, I want to ask you a question. What makes you think that you know what Jenna needs to learn in this life?
Yeah. Like we're basically playing God.
Yes.
Because we're trying to control so we feel safe.
That's exactly right.
For me, the feelings of codependency come up when someone comes home in a bad mood, or I leave someone's house and I pick up that they're in a bad mood. Instead of trying to fix it, I tend to go in the, what could I have done wrong? Like, and I retrace all my steps. And then instead of trying to fix it, I'm in freeze mode because I'm worried that I did something wrong. So I don't necessarily tend to be fixer. I tend to make it worse by, in a sense, it's very selfish because I'm making it about me, instead of trying to help in a sense.
Yeah. But here's the thing. They're both about you, whether it's you or whether it's me doing that, right? They're both about us. That person being in pain is creating pain for me. I really want my pain to end. That's what my therapist was like. You've worked for 20 years to create internal peace and a harmonious life, and your sister's dumpster fire of a life is like fucking with your peace. That's it. That's what's happening. You want your pain to stop. You want her to get it together so that your pain can stop. Right. Now, at first I was like, oh, well, that's not nice. Like, suddenly I was like, so I'm not Mother Teresa. Like I love to think of myself as, and she was like, nope. But it also let me off the hook. And she was like, you can't even fix it, Terri. Like it's not even within the realm of possibility, but you can believe in her and you can speak to her strengths and you can remove yourself. If talking to her about this abusive idiot is too painful, step back. And I did all of those things. And 9 months later, she left him, got sober, and has been sober ever since. And that was many years ago.
Wow.
And I love that thought that you said, that we're robbing them of their growth, because typically in our minds, we think we're encouraging their growth. So that's such an important part.
I want to just, that idea of, first of all, just assessing what can I control, what can't I control is like a big part of what you're saying there, I think. But also I love that you bring up that Mother Teresa idea, because that idea of altruism is we start feeling guilty for prioritizing ourselves because we think it makes us selfish somehow, right? Like we think that if we're not giving more to others than we're giving to ourselves, then we're selfish. And that's kind of madness. Like how could we ever give to others if we aren't full,
Yes. And the thing is, we don't, because what we end up doing is, that is a one-way ticket to Bitterland or Martyrland, as I like to say, because the truth is you will be bean counting. You will be. I can't believe Betty, after all I've done for her, like literally that's what you become. And you're like, oh my God. Wow.
That's so true.
When you take care of yourself though, you can give from a place of choice, not a place of fear. I'm giving because I'm afraid if I don't, you'll reject me. Not a place of need, the need to be needed, which has a lot to do with the codependency stuff. Giving from a place of free will, love, choice, a decision, a mindful decision. And you can choose to continue doing anything you want in your life if, according to me, that choice is mindful. So this book is going to help you get off automatic pilot, get out of these default positions that are not in your highest good and not in the highest good of the people in your life. That's the irony of the whole thing, as you were just saying, right? Is that it really doesn't make good relationships. It makes you feel like no one can ever be grateful enough or be thankful enough because you're giving from a disordered place.
Totally. And we become the bitter, resentful person. And we're, like you're saying, we're starving them, but we're just creating a cycle to continue this on
and teaching it to our children.
We say it a lot on the show, like choosing short-term suffering versus long-term or long-term suffering.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
and I haven't gotten to this part in your book yet, but if you are a high-functioning codependent, is there an action plan in your book?
Oh, Yes, there is.
Good.
But always, every single thing that I teach you in the book is itself is built on these 5 pillars of self-mastery that I created years ago, that I teach everything this way. So we start with self-awareness, and then we move into self-knowledge by doing all these inventories and going into the basement of your mind and getting vital data that we didn't have, but is in there. You just got to find it, right? So self-knowledge. And then the third one is self-acceptance, because it can be hard if we didn't have like the picture perfect childhood. If we feel like we want to protect the parental impactors now, we're like, but now they're great. And that was 20 years ago. Why do I gotta? There's so many ways that we deny ourselves acceptance. And that really provokes the child within. Like we're like, why am I'm 5. Why do I have to suck it up? So it's important, the self-acceptance. And then the fourth one is self-compassion, where the whole entire time throughout this process, I'm encouraging you to become super curious, become the observer of yourself and your reactions without judgment. Curiosity, compassion, love for that little you, because she's still in there. Like, stop judging, stop being so friggin' punitive and mean to yourself about what you should have known or what you should have done. Self-compassion, I think this is, at least with my therapy clients, this has been maybe the most challenging one to get them to stop. It's almost like that internal mean committee we think makes us, strive towards excellence or something, but it really doesn't. They just suck, and they just suck the joy out of life. So self-compassion is really important. And then the fifth one is self-mastery, which includes self-love and self-celebration, right? Because you're uniquely you, and that's amazing. Forget compare and despair. Like, that is such bullshit.
Yeah. What you said there about the inner critic, I deeply relate to. We Jade and I have an intuitive that we see, and she's like, your inner critic needs to sit
very
down.
loud.
Yeah.
Put it on the shelf.
Shush.
Yeah.
All right, Terri, sit down. In your book, you reference boundary destroyers and that the normal rules of boundary engagement don't apply. So what is a boundary destroyer? This sounds like I'm picturing just like a Hulk. Like knocking down walls.
Or like a narcissist that like preys on those okay.
Yes, Jade, that is correct. The boundary destroyers are super difficult personalities. They are could be narcissistic personality disorder, could be histrionic, could be bipolar, could be just some people who are just super oppositional, super difficult. I've really put them in the category of emotional predators, though, because they see the weakness, they see the sweetness, the empaths, the highly sensitive folks. They see us, right? They're like, yay, this is where they're going to do all the things for me. And so this again is where a lot of times you'll have narcissists and empaths and codependents getting together, and it's like the perfect, it's like a match made in heaven until all hell breaks loose, as I like to say, because it does. But it's like the person who's like, can't wait for it to be all about me. And then the other person being like, can't wait for it to be all about you. And you can only do that for so long. So why the regular rules of engagement, right? Healthy boundary engagement that I'm teaching you throughout the book, how to make a proactive boundary success plan, a whole chapter of 1,000,000,007 scripts, how to say no, how to make someone stop interrupting you, how to just get off the spot, not answer questions you don't want to answer, what to say if you bump into your ex who was a jerk in the supermarket. Like, literally, I covered every scenario known to mankind. But in real life, what you learn is that we communicate. As we gave a script before about, hey, I'd like to make a simple request or whatever. With people who are emotional predators, if you give them any information about you, a lot of times they will use it against you. So these are people who are not emotionally safe people. So the rules of engagement are different, because what I'm teaching you in the book is how to be less damaged, injured, hurt by boundary destroyers, how not to feed into, to play into what it is that it could be conscious and could be unconscious, right? Some people have no insight into their illness or into their issue, but you got to know that, bashing your head up against a wall. If I find this with narcissistic mothers, that adult daughters of narcissistic mothers, it's just so painful, because the little kid just keeps being like, dude, maybe this time it's going to be different though. Like, I just so want it to be different that, I wouldn't, I'm wanting them to protect themselves, but they're like, but I think and I'm like, but no, we have to look at the facts. There is no evidence to tell us that there's been any growth, and that this person is any safer now than they were last year or 10 years ago. So there's an acceptance, there's a stepping back from, but there's also not letting someone get away with it, because there's a difference between, and I'm not talking about, listen, just straight up for complete clarity. I'm not talking about if you are in any kind of a situation that is dangerous to you, violent situation. All I want you to do is safely remove yourself from that situation permanently. Like I don't have any strategies, boundary strategies for how to get along with an abuser. I don't, because it doesn't matter what you do. If you're in that cycle, it's unlikely that that's something you're going to say is going to change that, because it's a cycle of abuse, and it's called that for a reason. I do have a whole vlog and a video on how to safely leave a scary situation, an abusive situation. And the first thing is, do not tip your hand. If you're listening to this and you're in this, don't get all amplified and excited about setting boundaries with someone who it might put you in harm's way. Don't show your cards. Anyway, I just wanted to say that, because it's really important, if someone is in a scary or an abusive situation, to know that there is a way that you can safely leave. I don't think it's likely that you can negotiate boundaries with someone like that, though.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're talking to a big audience here that can understand that, because one of our most popular episodes was specifically about narcissistic personality disorder. So, I mean, one of our most listened to episodes. So there's definitely people, well, as you know, of course, but definitely people listening to the show that are dealing with that, or maybe in the middle of it, or
recovering it from it.
Yeah, survived
That's
it.
so funny, though, that you say that, because I was so surprised that I've got a bunch of things on narcissism and daughters of narcissistic mothers in particular. I actually have a course called The Mother Wound, because it is so prevalent, but it is still, I think I put that out 4 years ago, every single week, even though I have thousands of views, it is still my most viewed YouTube video.
Wow. Do you find that most people that sign up for the Mother Wound are men or women, or is it a mix?
It's, my audience is probably 90% women.
Oh, okay.
So anyone's welcome to with that.
Sure.
But I find that the mother wound in particular, even though men have it, but daughters and mothers have a very particular connection, and that wound is major. And the reason I did a course, I didn't even really actually want to, but my audience was like, but we really want one. Because I was like, I'm so busy. I got the book. I'm just going to do something light. No, it ended up being like 6 full modules. I was like, stop pretending you're ever doing anything light, because you're right. But you can heal from a mother wound. And one really powerful thing that you can do is find like a chosen family, like find good replacements. Right? I always looked for warm men in authority, like who would talk, who were the opposite of my father. And there's something so healing about seeing like, oh, someone could be like this too. So find a friend who's maternal, and be mindful that you also might draw other narcissistic, bossy, controlling, quote unquote, friends into your life.
It's also in a way our like psyche asking us to heal it so that we stop doing that. And I think your friend, is it the same Northrup that wrote the mother-daughter book?
That's actually her mother. So my friend is Kim, and I know
that's
Christian
a
too.
Big book, but I'm trying to get through it. But it's so important, mother-daughter connection. We're about to move into our last little lightning round questions that we ask everybody at the end of the show. But I was curious really quick. The book Nonviolent Communication is so much about, non-aggressive ways of speaking. And I'm curious if when you really adopt that way of communication, if people does that make you more prone to people pushing your boundaries, do you think? Or
no, because here's the thing, I actually quote Marshall Rosenberg in the book. I give as one of the strategies. They're very much like his theory is very much like, I'm just going to talk true. I'm going to do this neutrally. I'm going to not judge. I'm going to say, hey, when I came in and I opened the refrigerator door and I saw that there was no groceries, I realized you must not have gone shopping. I felt this, that even, obviously the person must have said they were going to go shopping or whatever. So it's stating all these things. I'd like to make a simple request, though, is also something from nonviolent communication, which I love. I think that there's no one size fits all. I think that I give you a lot of different strategies in the book and a million different scripts that you can make your own. So I do a lot of sentence starters, because a lot of times we just don't know what to say to get started. Like,
we need the how-to.
I love that. I need that tangible how-to for sure.
Yes. And if you just had 5 that were your go-to, I promise you, the next time you were in a situation and you wanted to say something, it would literally, if you practice it with each other in the mirror, it will just fall out of your mouth naturally. It's so weird. Clients will be so blown away. And I'm like, no, but you set the stage. By having the words, you're literally telling your child within you, and you're putting your stake in the universe, putting your stake in the ground, saying, that is my limit. I'm not going to act like this person didn't just say something that I found offensive or lewd or rude or racist or whatever. Like, I'm saying, not cool. No, Uncle Bob. No. I'm not doing that, or whatever the thing is, because that's another thing that people really struggle with boundary wise is, what do I say? What if I don't want to talk about it? What if someone asks me, why am I not married? Why don't I want kids? Did I gain weight? How much money do I make? And if you're a good girl, sometimes you answer and then later you want to just punch yourself in the face. You're like, why did I let them, but it isn't letting them. It's when you're prepared, you will say, that's interesting. Why would you ask me that?
Yeah.
Instead of answering.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. That is Kasia Urbaniak. You guys would love her if you don't know her. She's a power dynamic expert who was a dominatrix for many years, studied all over the world with all of these female monks in China. Like, she's so brilliant. And her work, I also have that in the book. There's just this thing about, how do you get off the spot when someone says something really messed up to you? Like, how do you not let them dominate you? And she really teaches about power dynamics, that by just saying, why would you want to know that?
Yeah.
You now have flipped the script, and now you're the dominant one and they're in the submissive position.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is, don't answer the mother effing question if you do not want that person having that information about you. But her work is great.
Good.
Ooh,
yeah, sounds right up our alley.
I know.
Yeah, you would love it.
I've been transgressing myself more than anyone's been transgressing me. So I got to definitely figure out my boundaries. So getting that book, getting all the tools, and it's going to happen. I'm going to report to you, Terri, on how that goes.
Yes, you are. I'm following up. So I have one cell phone number. I need the other one. I'm going to be texting you, ladies.
Absolutely.
Oh, good. Yeah. Thank you.
So, okay, we have just a few short questions here at the end to ask you. And the first one is, if you could hug your younger self right now, what would you say to her?
Oh, you're the best. You're so awesome. You're amazing. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, a lot of little girls have actually never heard that.
Yeah.
I know I hadn't. If you could have the whole world read one book, which would it be?
Right now, it'd be Boundary Boss.
Yeah.
If you want to get that, go to boundarybossbook.com.
Yes.
Yeah, it's on pre-order right now, right? Is it?
Actually, it just dropped on the 20th.
Oh, awesome. Okay, it's available. Yeah.
Perfect. And if you could whisper one phrase to anyone and everyone on the planet, what would it be?
You are worthy.
That's really good. I hope all of our listeners really felt that. Before we let you go, where can people find you online?
Well, I want them to go find the gift that I'm giving to you guys, because we're going to do the one on boundaries and codependency, because I think that was a lot of what we talked about. I think that will help. Go to boundaryboss.me/magic, spelt the way these ladies spell it, MAJIC.
Yes, we're going to put it in the show notes. We'll link that there as well. So you can just click below and find that.
Boundaryboss.me/magic.
Yeah,
exactly.
And Terri, we follow you on Instagram and love your content there as well. So our followers can find you there also. You are just an absolute light in this world. And I'm so glad we've come across your work. And I know it's going to be something that really deepens my own journey and my own healing with myself. So thank you for doing the work that you are doing. You are definitely a light.
Truly changing lives. Yeah.
I'm so happy. Thank you guys so much for having me and for helping me get it out there. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Man, she reminded me of it was someone from a movie, some powerful woman, but the conscious version. I don't know if it was the conscious version of the woman in Devil Wears Prada, or maybe you know what I mean?
I got the vibe.
Some powerhouse, but very conscious in it,
Yes. And again, one of my articulation goals for sure. I don't think she said or but or any of these things.
Oh Lord. That's
beautiful, beautiful work though. I am seriously digging so deep into her work of late, because I know this is a place that my trends, like I was saying, where I trespass myself and where I'm trespassed by others. Well, I'm not even trespassed by others because I haven't set any boundaries. So obviously I need to do some work, because I just get bitter and resentful because I don't have any healthy boundaries set. So here we go.
Yeah. And my magic trick, I think yours is pulled from her. I know mine is, but it's why healthy relationships may feel boring. So it's, if I guess these are things to remember if you feel your healthy relationship is boring. I know that in my relationship in the very beginning, I would get kind of like I wanted some more entertainment or like some excitement or something.
I
But
definitely have had that for sure, that happened in a relationship before. Yes.
But a lot of the times it just feels boring because we're so used to chaos. So,
yes.
So these are reasons why healthy relationships feel boring. And these are things that we can just remember. Okay. So if parents or caretakers were inconsistent in meeting your needs, then hot and cold behaviors feel familiar to you, and you associate consistency with incompatibility. Okay, so that's one thing to remember. I'm only listing 3. The second one is your early environment felt unsafe, so you turn to fantasy as a coping mechanism, which then means you idealize relationships as an escape from reality. And then the third one, the last one, is you learn to perform in order to win love. And I know we talked a lot about that today, but basically that causes you to associate love with self-sacrifice. And then you struggle to be yourself with partners you don't need to perform for. So all these things being absent in your healthy relationship may feel boring, but if you can remember that you're just lacking the chaos that gave you the thrill, you may find that it's not the relationship
that's so freaking powerful, because seriously, I have been
that's from her Instagram.
Beautiful. You gotta follow her.
Yeah.
I have been in a relationship where I was probably the most, kind of even keeled relationship I've ever been in of my, track record, and definitely a secure attachment style, like to someone who is very, very grounded. And for me, I was like, there's like no passion here. This is getting boring. And of course, not till many, many years later where I started doing this work, where I realized it was just me trying to stir shit up, because that's what felt like home to me. Chaos felt like home, because that is much closer to the way that I was brought up and much closer to the relationships I witnessed growing up that looked like, they were the model relationship growing up. It wasn't ideal, not an ideal relationship, but that to me really hit hard. And I've had to do a lot of work to unwind that idea that we have to be always in conflict or somehow cold and hot, or someone has to be in a bad mood in order for the relationship to have.
Yeah. And then, some people, they may try to run away from the healthy relationship, or some people may try to add chaos so that it's not boring, like they add the conflict. So
I think there's also a factor in there. Terri, I definitely have heard her talk about this a lot, where when we slow down enough in a relationship, or are calm enough in a relationship where there isn't all that turbulence, it causes us to actually have to be intimate. The thing we're asking for all the time, like, why can't we just stop fighting? Why can't this just be peaceful when we're always fighting? Then when it actually happens in a relationship, or you find a relationship where it's already pretty peaceful, you freak out, because you're like, oh, wait, I don't know how to be like intimate with myself and know myself this way and be quiet here and not have to blame others and all these things. And just all the shit bubbles up that we have to kind of figure out how much of it is ours to take responsibility for. So, I love that magic trick for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
So mine is not from Terri specifically. It's kind of like a combination of stuff I've been working on, and
around boundaries.
Yeah. It is around boundaries, specifically with family members. And it is something that Terri does talk about, though. So I don't want to say she doesn't cover this, because she certainly will. She does all things boundaries. I can't even believe how much there is to learn about boundaries.
Yeah.
So this is what, if you're asking yourself the question, what should you do if a family member doesn't respect a boundary? Which, if you've tried setting any of boundaries of your own, you're going to learn real quick that the people in your life are not going to be used to that, and they're going to resist them for sure. You're not going to respect them easily. So first off, obviously try restating the boundary, see if that makes any difference.
But do any of us like boundaries?
No, because it's uncomfortable.
Because I was thinking earlier, like, well, I don't like when my boyfriend sets boundaries or tells me like this isn't going to work. And then I was like, fuck, am I a narcissist? And then I thought, well, if I was, I wouldn't be having this conversation with myself. And so maybe it's just normal that we don't like boundaries, right?
Yeah, it's normal that we don't like anything that causes us discomfort or that causes change, because that is uncomfortable to our primal ego.
So either way, this is common in families.
Totally common. And you're not doing it wrong, because this is all a dance. It's an experiment and it's not perfect, but we can learn a lot from Terri in this episode today and her book and all the good things. So obviously, if you're not getting your boundaries respected, first thing to do is try restating the boundary. If that makes a difference, fantastic. If not, if there's like a repeated disregard or inability for that for the family member to respect the boundary. Sometimes it is going to be walking away from the relationship that's needed, or at least for a period of time. That may be a necessary step to take. And this can look like a family member repeatedly sending mean text messages. And when this happens, it's recommended that the recipient expresses, I am not responding and will be blocking your number for the next 24 hours. We can speak again when things have cooled down a bit. The point is there, this is hard to do though. It feels scary to do that, right? But
I do that boundary all the time.
If you can clearly state your boundaries and they're still not respected, it could help to send a message like that, where you're stating the intention to take some distance while you're also, obviously you're choosing to do that. And you're making it clear to them that you're not fully abandoning them, right? So
it's just a time to cool down.
Yeah. And if they subsequently continue to contact you, obviously don't engage with them because you've already made your stance clear. This is where you do the actual work of holding your boundary. Because if you further engage with them, then it's likely to reinforce that there's going to be some sort of ongoing connection. And that can get really confusing. And I think that's a big deal with boundaries is don't make it confusing. Be really clear with setting the expectations and your intentions. Hold the boundary, because that's so you don't transgress and trespass yourself, really, more than anything. And you don't want to make it confusing for the other person who you would like to help them learn how to love you better. So, like I said, this still sets up the way of doing it that I just explained still sets a boundary while not abandoning the person who you're trying to set it with. And it allows space for both of the people to process the conflict before addressing it again. However, if it's not an isolated incident and you continue to run into the same issues, you may need to remove yourself from the situation and cut off all contact for a longer period of time, if not permanently. So that sometimes is the issue. And it's important to note that sometimes the amount of pain and anguish caused by a familial relationship may mean it is not worth continuing. It's super hard to swallow because, like we were talking about with Terri, it can feel like death to say no to some of the people in our lives. It can really feel like that fear of abandonment that you think is going to be the result of you saying no or not, showing up for whatever they're asking you to show up for. It can feel literally so painful, so scary that you think, if I don't do this, my whole life's going to fall apart. Right. So it is about getting that mindfulness gap and really looking at it and being is this reasonable? My response here, like Terri was talking about. So in scenarios like this, where it feels that aggressive and that big for you to hold, speaking with a professional or seeking therapy is obviously a great resource to help you decide what to do next.
Yeah. And for the men listening, codependency and boundaries are a lot of the things that the work we're doing in our workshop, Awakening the Healing Within, are very healing for. So I know we mentioned it at the top of the show, but if this, episode really resonated with you and you feel like you have a lot of, the stuff that we talked about in here that obviously Mercedes and I said that we both struggle with, the work that we will do together in the workshop is a huge starting point for healing that and for developing the confidence needed and the self-respect needed to set those boundaries. So go, sign up for that. And I know it will aid in this part of your healing journey.
Yeah. And that can be done, guys, at awakeningkings.com. Get on the early bird list. Do not miss out because spots are limited and they are going fast. We are almost full to capacity. Yeah. So awakeningkings.com, put your email in the early bird list, gives you a 24-hour pre-access to purchasing the course. We will definitely be in there doing the work with you. And by the way, it's totally anonymous if you so choose.
Yeah.
So there will be, we don't know your identity or any of those things. So I know for a lot of people, they aren't super comfortable getting into these different therapies and modalities yet.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you realize crap, it already started, there's going to be a playback for the call 1. So you'll be able to listen back on that and you can join us for the next couple of calls that, like Mercedes said, can be anonymous. All right, Magic Mabbers, thank you so much for tuning in and taking this journey with us. If this episode held some magic for you, please share it with your friends and family. This would mean so much for us. And don't forget to join us on our Instagram page at The Magic Hour and let us know what your favorite episodes have been so far. We appreciate all of your feedback and want to know what is lighting you up.
Yes, fam. And it means the world to us when you just send us that 5-star on Apple Podcasts or write us a little review and let us know what you like about the show, or just put a heart in there and say, we love you guys, because that is what gets our show to reach other people that might be needing this information about boundaries today. We love you, love you, love you, fam. Go listen to some of our past episodes in our podcast library now. And until then,
be a light.
Be a light.